All right, if you guys have not heard the news, there was a second attempt, and it has been confirmed on a second attempt on former President Trump's life. And in this episode today, we're going to discuss the details, at least that we currently have right now, the details that have been released. Everything beyond what we're discussing in this stream is speculation at this point. So we're going to cover the details of this event that just occurred, and again, it has been confirmed. So we're going to go through those details, but then we're also going to discuss one aspect of this entire event, which actually got brought up in the last one, where Trump himself was even saying, this was a miracle. The fact that the bullet missed him, went by his ear. Well, it didn't, I guess, miss him. It went through his ear, but it got so close to killing him. He was even saying in his interview with Elon Musk over on X that people should start thinking about considering believing in God as a result of what happened to him. And this is just another, I think, instance where people are going to start to question what is really going on here. Like, is God actually intervening in this case of is Trump for real? Like, is God really what's going on with this? Because once we start to kind of look at the details of this case and the fact that they got him before he was able to do any damage, even though he was kind of set up and kind of ready to go, it's going to start to raise questions for people like, what is ultimately going on here? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite Jimmy on with us right as everything is happening, because I want to get some more developed and more intellectual thoughts out in the sphere before people start to speculate and talk about this, so that you guys can be prepared if you happen to do have a conversation with someone on this topic. But Jimmy, it's great to have you back. Let's just go ahead and dive straight in. So should we go ahead and pull up the link that I've got pulled up? We can just kind of go over some of the details about the whole thing that's happened. I actually had a friend of mine just tell me, he was like, hey, Trump, there was another assassination attempt. And I think I was like about to make dinner. And then, yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. And there's a lot we don't know, but there's a little bit we do know, and we may as well talk about it.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and pull up this article. This was posted on the NY Post. So yeah, walk us through this article. I'm not sure what video is playing right now. It looks like that's not the right video. Maybe I can just refresh this page. But yeah, we're not going to actually play or listen to this video. So many ads on these websites.
Yeah.
But yeah, walk us through some of the details here.
Well, from my understanding, apparently at 1:30 Eastern time, there was a call placed by the Secret Service to the sheriff's department of the county in which Trump's golf course in Florida is located, and they reported that there had been some gunfire, and they also were able to find a witness who said they saw a guy fleeing the site where the gunfire came from, and he hopped into a black, I think it was a Nissan, and he took a picture and got a picture of the license plate. So what they then did was they have apparently license plate cameras in Florida, and so they turned those on to look for this one license plate. They got a hit on an interstate. They were then able to notify the local sheriff's department, who were able to intercept the vehicle and arrest the gentleman. His name has now been announced. He's Ryan Ruth of Hawaii, and his social media has been found. People are going through that now. And he also, it's recently been announced via News Nation that it's been discovered he has a 2002 conviction for having a weapon of mass destruction. And so he has a criminal history. Not a lot else has been announced about him. Not a lot else is known about him. But apparently what happened, according to the Secret Service, was former President Trump was playing a game of golf on his golf course. And since he's not currently president, they don't have the complete golf course surrounded by agents. They said they would if he was the current president, but what they do instead is his Secret Service detail creates a bubble of watchfulness around him, so that when he's on one hole, and reportedly he was between holes 5 and 6, they have a team of agents that are 1 to 2 holes ahead, looking for danger. And it was one of the members of that advance party that was one or two holes ahead spotted a rifle barrel peeking out of the shrubbery. He then exchanged fire. Well, he fired on whoever was holding the rifle, and it's unclear as of the latest report that I've seen whether the gunman fired back or not. But he ended up fleeing and hopping into his black Nissan, which they caught him in. They took him into custody. It's reported that he was calm. He was unarmed at that point. And they've also announced a few details about the site in question. They said that they found not only the rifle left at the site, which was an AK-47, no word on whether it was automatic or semi-automatic, but they found the rifle. They also found 2 backpacks hung to the chain link fence, and they were filled with ceramic tiles. And you might wonder, why would that be? Well, if you look at photographs of them, the rifle is aiming into the golf course between the 2 backpacks full of ceramic tiles. And it looks to me like what that is a form of armor, so that if someone shot at the gunman, they'd have a very narrow window of opportunity in the gap between the backpacks, and then the backpacks and the ceramic tiles in them would catch any bullets and thus provide a measure of protection for the gunman.
Can you see this on the screen? I'm
Yes.
putting it over. I mean, This is not the most aesthetically pleasing way to do this, but you can nevertheless see what Jimmy is talking about here. This is a picture of the scene itself with his rifle between these 2 Kevlar. It's like a Kevlar or some type of clay. I can't remember what the experts were mentioning. Anyways, it's bulletproof. These 2 backpacks on the side of him, and then that GoPro over there on the left.
Yeah, I was also going to mention there's a GoPro, which you can see there. So he wanted to take footage of his assassination of President Trump. And so basically, he's got video documentation of the crime he's planning to commit, and he's got a hardened location from which he was planning to commit the crime.
Ceramic tile. That's the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, ceramic tile in there. Yeah, so it was definitely it was obviously planned, and if time would have just passed for a little bit longer, it would have been one of those outcomes. Like in the case of I'm completely blanking on the previous guy's name. Was it Crooks? Thomas Crooks?
Sounds reasonable. I tell you the truth, I haven't focused on that.
Cooks or Crooks, yeah. Anyways, in the previous attempt, that one it was just kind of odd that he turned his head at the last second. So shots were definitely fired in that case. And in this case, I mean, we're hearing the story that we're hearing now, but it could have been a lot different had the person walking around, the Secret Service agent walking around, not had seen what he did see and then engaged him.
And there's also a point that I think is worth making here. Can you put up that picture again just for a moment of the scene? So if you look at that rifle is not peeking very far through the chain link fence. And so the fact that a Secret Service agent was able to spot that is notable to me. That's pretty good spotting. He was being very observant. Also, people have asked how far away was President Trump, and the sheriff's office announced he was apparently something like 300 to 500 yards away on the previous hole, but that's not very far, as they acknowledged, when you've got a rifle like this.
Right. Yeah. Especially if you've got it scoped in. He did have a scope on it, and this is from my understanding, this is an illegal weapon no matter what state you're in. AK-47, I don't think that's legal anywhere.
I would have to check on that.
Okay. Yeah, it could be. Well, I guess it also is probably going to depend on what sort of features this one in particular has got. If it's fully automatic, that's not. I don't think that's going to be legal anywhere. But yeah, I guess that's not super relevant to the case here. I mean, it is possible you can scope those things in really closely, and so if time had passed just a little bit longer, we could be discussing right now a completely different story. So it does raise the question, though.
I just did a check, and apparently AK-47s are legal in the United States, but it depends on the model of the AK-47 and which state you're living in.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. See, that's what I'm thinking. It could be that fully automatic weapons, AK-47s, are illegal, but if you just get a semi-automatic, it should be okay. Um, which raises other questions, but
I would
yeah. So
wonder
the
if he had conviction for having a weapon of mass destruction, how did he get this thing? Because it's not like the Old West. In the
right.
Old West, if you went to prison and had been convicted, they just hand you your gun back when you got out of prison, because it was considered an ordinary tool that people needed to survive. But that's not
Hmm.
the case anymore. And if you get convicted of, a felony, which I'm pretty sure having a weapon of mass destruction is, then you should be prohibited from being able to purchase weapons. So I'd be curious to know how he got this.
Let's perhaps discuss the hypothesis that's been thrown around. I mean, I guess it's been thrown around more on the left, but the
Mhm.
hypothesis is that this is all a big setup. Like even the first assassination attempt wasn't real. Like this is all some sort of like uh, conspiracy. They're trying to just basically ramp up the poll numbers for Trump, and so they're setting up these fake assassination attempts because obviously, like when something like this happens, gets reported, a lot of eyes are gonna be on it. And so, what do you make of that hypothesis? I mean, I do. There's like
Mhm.
very little chance I'm going to take that seriously. I just don't.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so as someone who studies mysteries, including true crime and including assassinations, like I've actually done a lot of research on famous assassinations. I would say that hypothesis is officially stupid.
Okay.
If
I thought you were going a completely different. I thought you're going to
um,
be like, no, this is a credible hypothesis. Instead, you're like, that's a
no,
stupid.
yeah, because if
Uh,
you are whoever the gunman is, you're not in a controlled situation, and so whoever the gunman is likely to end up dead or caught.
mhm.
And you're that means the stakes for the person are very high, because if he's caught, he's going to go to jail or be put in a mental institution for years and years, or he's going to be executed, or any number of things. And so the stakes are very, very high for the gunman.
Mhm.
And you and there's basically nobody you could trust to take that kind of fall for you. And so you would not be able to find a trustworthy person to shoot at you and do so in a reliable way. To wait, like with the first one, Trump would have been dead if he hadn't turned his head at the last second. And it's just completely implausible to suggest Trump hired a gunman who was then going to get killed, and yet that gunman would be trustworthy enough to not pull the trigger until Trump turned his head. That's just completely implausible.
Yeah. Well, what they're saying, I think, though, is that because I've seen pictures on X, and it seems to just be like basically these days a hub for conspiracy theories. Not on both sides. It's not just on the
Mhm.
right. It's also on
Yeah.
the left. But I've seen like zoom in pictures of like this particular angle of Trump's ear where it's like, how did that heal so perfectly? And people are asking the question, maybe it wasn't actually shot at all. Like maybe it was just a big, people are
Well,
saying that, and there were shots fired, and someone did die. Well, multiple people died,
yep.
but perhaps Trump wasn't actually shot, and that was never the intention. They were trying to shoot past him, and yeah,
That's still it's still ridiculous. You're not going to find a gunman who is going to be willing to die in this situation, because that's what happened. Who's going to take a rifle up there that is loaded and start shooting people, but not you?
mhm.
I mean, how do you can't just go online and Google trustworthy assassins willing to die for an assignment.
Yeah,
There's no way to find people like that. So I would say that theory is completely non-credible. So are some of the theories you hear from the other side of the political spectrum, that this was like a setup by the Democratic National Convention,
hmm
or Democratic leadership. They uh, the only plausible theory like this that I think has any degree of plausibility to it is that the Secret Service was weakened and deliberately, and was given former President Trump less protection than it should have, But even with that one, you gotta, I mean, I think it's real clear they bungled that first one.
Yeah.
And
I
there's a
mean, it could be
lot of,
that they also bungled this one. I do have
Mhm,
a clip pulled up where something you mentioned earlier from that press conference.
mhm,
It does seem like they had less people, less service, Secret
mhm.
Service out there than they could have, and
Yeah.
they give a reason for this, but it's still very all relevant. So why don't I
Mhm.
just go ahead and play that clip really quickly? I've already got
Okay,
it
then
queued up here.
I'd like to touch base on why that's implausible, though.
Okay, well, yeah, finish your thought, then we can play this clip.
Okay, so whenever it's clear that the Secret Service really badly bungled on that first attempt, and they and the FBI have been stonewalling since then, which people from both sides have acknowledged, and so that's evidence that they are covering something up. The question is, are they covering up deliberate malfeasance or are they covering up incompetence? And there's a famous saying, never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. And so
Hmm.
I would say the weakening of the Secret Service efforts around the first one, even though you could say it was a deliberate attempt to pull back enough to let him get assassinated, I still think it's more probable they were just incompetent. And I'm sure there's political ill will wrapped up in that, especially because of who the former head of the Secret Service was. And she was not a good actor, which is one of the reasons she left office so quickly after all this. But I'm sure there's some malice wrapped up in it, but that's not the same thing as saying he was deliberately set up, at least based on the evidence we have now.
Hmm. Well, before we go to this clip, let me just, I mean, we have got a lot of live viewers
Mhm.
sort of just joining us. So let me just go
Yeah.
over some of the basic stuff of what's going on right now. So there was indeed a second assassination attempt. This has been confirmed on
Oh,
President Trump's.
and we should say he's not only well, but uninjured.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no actual shots on President Trump at all. Like the shots that were fired in this situation were on the shooter himself, or
He
I
may,
guess the would-be shooter.
he may have fired back. They haven't confirmed that one way or another. But
Gotcha.
President Trump was not struck.
Okay. Yeah. So Trump safe. Let me get these ads out of the way. Jeez.
I know it's crazy these days.
Yeah, it's impossible to just look at a website. Oh my goodness. Trump
Even if you
safe
have
and well after.
an ad blocker, it goes crazy.
I should install one. This is ridiculous. Trump safe and well after being targeted by would-be assassin with scoped AK-47 just a few hundred yards away while ex-president played golf. That's the basic story. And we've at the beginning of the stream, we kind of covered this and talked about some of the details. This is an image of the would-be assassin, and details are going to come. More details about this person are going to be released, obviously, online over the next few days. And some people are starting to look at his old social media posts, trying to figure out what a motivation might be. I think his name, yeah, Ryan Ruth. And
Ruth. He's from Hawaii. He's 58 years old.
And there's other images of him online if you guys want to go search on X, which we may take a look at in just a second. But getting back to
He's
this,
wearing body armor there in that first picture.
right? Yeah, it's an interesting picture that they've got that on camera. But this, I think, was taken on the scene. So this is a surveillance camera type image of Ryan Ruth. And it looks like they've got it misspelled here, but yeah. So
they do. They could have had him lift up his shirt like that to show he wasn't carrying any weapons or a suicide belt or anything like that.
Oh yeah, that is a good.
If that's taken
point
on the scene, that would be my guess is what's going on.
Yeah,
in
that
picture.
could be his vehicle behind him. Well, let's get to this. Okay, so this kind of raises some red flags, I think, for a number of reasons. This video we're about to watch, because it talks about the fact that they had less people, less Secret Service members on Trump because he's a former president. He's not a current president. If he was a current president, they would have shut down the whole golf course. But instead, they had basically one guy go and look at the next hole. Well, let me just play the clip because it's concerning, but then it's also relevant to the question, the bigger question we're going to be asking, which is whether or not this was some sort of intervention that occurred on the part of God, and is God protecting Trump from all of these would-be assassins. But let's watch this clip. Real quick, before we watch it, the volume is a little bit low. So if you want, you can turn your volume up in your car or whatever you're listening to this on. And then I'll pause it and then give you guys a note to turn your volume back down. But so here we go. I'm about to play it. Here we go.
Well, you got to understand the golf course is surrounded by shrubbery. So when somebody gets into the shrubbery, they're pretty much out of sight. All right. And at this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. But because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible.
Okay, so he said if he was the sitting president, we would have had the whole golf course siphoned off. But in this case, since he's not the sitting president, we just basically created a bubble around him and just sort of guided him through the course that way. And so for sure, commentators on the right side of the spectrum, conservatives and stuff, are going to say, okay, there was an attempt on President Trump's life, former President Trump's life, 2 months ago. Like, why are you not taking more measures right now to protect him? And that's one of the reasons why I think this clip is important, but it's also important relative to this topic that we're going to be discussing, whether or not God is involved here, because if there were less measures in this case to protect Trump, but then he nevertheless was protected, that's going to raise questions for people. So, or at least it's going to, I think, lend a little bit of support to the hypothesis that God intervened, because there's basically a bigger chance that something bad could have happened, but then something happened again where it just, fell through. So, but Jimmy, yeah, any thoughts on this clip?
Yeah. So just to explore it a little bit, I think that the fact he's not the current president, meaning he gets less security coverage than whoever the current president is, I think that's reasonable.
Right.
That in itself is reasonable, but he is a former president, and so he needs some coverage. And the question is, how much coverage does he need? And I can see two factors that cut in opposite directions. One factor is, as you pointed out, there was an assassination attempt on him 2 months ago. And so that would argue he needs more protection right now.
Right.
And the Secret Service would say they've been giving him more protection at his public rallies. But here's where the other factor comes in, which is this was not a public rally. He's on a private golf course here that's in a secluded area. How would you even know that he was out playing golf? Maybe that's announced on his schedule. I don't know, but it is secluded. It's surrounded by trees, and we don't know if anyone else was on the golf course. All the sheriff said was we didn't have the golf course surrounded the way we would if he was a sit-in president. But especially if it was not publicly announced that he was on the golf course, and if no one else was on the golf course, if they just cleared it internally but didn't completely surround it, then you could argue that the level of security he had today was reasonable given the threat level for a private unoccupied golf course. Now, I think you can argue that both ways. I think we've got factors pointing in different directions. And so I could see people saying, oh yeah, he had plenty of coverage for today. I could also see people saying, hell no, he did not have plenty of coverage for today. So I think that's debatable.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess I would lean on the side of, if he just underwent some really serious assassination attempt, I mean, at least up until the election, because I think that's after that point, you're going to be able to decide what to do, because after that point, he's not necessarily, like, suppose that he doesn't get elected, he's not going to be a threat to these people, I think, in the same way that he is now, because there's a potential that he will get elected. And I think stuff like this just makes it more likely that he's going to get elected. But in the case that he does get elected, then he's automatically going to receive more Secret Service members. So, like, I think it just makes the most sense to increase the level of Secret Service right now. He's going to get it anyway if he becomes president. Like, might as well just start now. And then if he's not president, or if he doesn't get elected, then he's not going to be a threat. So you might as well just do it in the interim right now while this threat is sort of looming. But while you're going to respond to that, let me go ahead and put up this image one more time for people that are just joining. This is the image that they took on the scene of the would-be shooters sort of setup. He's got these two backpacks with some bulletproof material there. So he's got this like, this is an AK-47 that he's using to shoot through this material. So hopefully he's trying to like shield himself from fire from Secret Service. And then on the left there is a GoPro that he hung also there to hopefully get everything on film. But yeah, Jimmy, as you're kind of responding to that, I'll just kind of leave this up for people.
Yeah, no, I think that the position you articulated that he should have more coverage than he did is a defensible one. I think it's defensible, but I also would say it's defensible to say if they cleared this golf course of other people and it was not publicly known he would be golfing, and given its seclusion, that even though they have been giving him more protection, like at public events, this was not a public event. And so and we don't know how many agents were involved at this point, protecting him. So right. I think I have to leave it open to, they may have had an appropriate level of protection for him, at least a debatably open level.
All right, let's now turn and discuss. I mean, if there are any more facts that come in, and guys, if you're following this and you've been following along with the news and everything, and you know of something that's occurred that we haven't talked about, please leave it. I can't promise to check all of the comments. We're receiving too many, but if you send it in as a super chat, that will help me make sure that I can flag it and include that information on the screen. So if you do know of something that we haven't covered, then please leave a super chat with that information so that we can get to it and cover it on the show. But let's transition right now and talk about this whole hypothesis that has been a subject of discussion since the last assassination attempt. Trump again has brought it up himself in his interview with Elon Musk. He's like, I think you guys should start considering belief in God because this was miraculous. And what are your overall thoughts on this argument, this thought, Jimmy, that God is involved here? God is protecting Trump, possibly even intervening. There's some sort of miraculous divine intervention going on. And I know you can make distinctions between all of these things, but give us your thoughts, Jimmy.
Well, so I guess we need to think for a second about how divine causality works. Now, because God is sovereign over the entire universe, and because he's omnipotent, he could stop anything from happening. So if he chose to intervene, he could stop it. And so everything that happens, whether good or bad, happens within God's will in the sense of his permissive will. He at least chooses to permit, to allow something to happen if it happens. And that includes both good stuff and bad stuff, which then gets us into the problem of evil, which is another question, although we can talk about it if you want. Beyond his permissive will, though, there's his positive will or his decretal will, what he decrees to happen. And if God decrees something to happen, it could happen in two ways. The first is he could sit back and let the laws that he built into the universe, including human nature, take care of it and bring it about without him having to personally intervene. On the other hand, he may not do that. He may choose to intervene directly himself or, through an agent like a guardian angel or something like that. The question, if there is divine intervention, then becomes, is it detectable? Because we don't know how often special divine intervention happens. We know that God has set up the universe in such a way that we see certain laws regularly being followed, but we don't know what causes those laws to be so regular. It could be that God has set them up independent of himself, or it could be he's running the whole show, through him and his agents, in which case there's a lot more intervention than we otherwise would suspect. What makes intervention detectable is when it goes well beyond the ordinary operation of the laws, or to frame it a little bit differently, if things go well beyond what quote unquote random chance would allow, then that gives you a basis for proposing special divine intervention, as opposed to either the regular laws of nature or what God does intervene with, but in a way that's consistent with the regular laws. So with that as background, in looking at the assassination attempts, the first one it seems to me there's a greater chance, or there's a greater argument for special divine intervention that is detectable, because because of the fact he turned his head, and that's what saved his life. Also, there's all the screw ups that the Secret Service did in letting the guy get into position to shoot him,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think those really count as an argument in favor of divine intervention, because that's attributable to Secret Service incompetence. Um, the strongest piece of evidence for detectable divine intervention in that case would be the head turn saving his life. On the other hand, to me, that doesn't prove divine intervention. That could be, is consistent with God's will. God willed that he survive that, at least within his providential will. But that doesn't prove the coincidence of the head turn alone, to me, does not prove detectable divine intervention. Then we now incorporate this second event, and it seems to me the strongest argument for detectable divine intervention here is the fact that the barrel of the rifle and the overall setup at least looks like it had low visibility. And yet a Secret Service agent was able to spot it before the gunman was able to do anything. Now, that can be counterbalanced by the fact they are paid to and trained to be very observant. And so the mere fact that this had low visibility doesn't mean that whoever the agent was, couldn't naturally have detected it. So I think that in both cases, there are points that you could use to argue for detectable divine intervention, but I personally would not be persuaded that that's definitely what's going on. I acknowledge the force
Right.
of those points, but I wouldn't say I can say with confidence that God is definitely intervening in a special way.
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts on what you just said. First, I want to go back over to X and just kind of show you guys some of the top posts that are being said on this. Looks like Vice President Kamala Harris has actually made a note on this. She said, "I have been briefed on reports of gunshots fired near former President Trump and his property in Florida, and I'm glad he is safe. Violence has no place in America." So
I've seen some interesting commentary on that post.
Okay, what have you seen?
Well, Vice President Harris has been taken to task for that, because she, and like many other people on her side of the political spectrum, have been accusing Trump of, like they have accused previous Republican presidents and candidates, of being either Hitler or the next best thing to Hitler, and as a major existential threat to our democracy and stuff like that. So if she really believed that President Trump, former President Trump, was an existential threat to American democracy, that would put him in the same general category as Hitler. Maybe not exactly as bad, but in the same general category. And I've seen people saying, this just shows how insincere you are, because you don't express how glad you are that Hitler, or almost Hitler, was not injured. And so this kind of reveals either you're insincere about the fact you're glad that he's safe, or you're insincere about the fact you think he's an existential threat to democracy.
Yeah, I think this post here that I've just scrolled to is a good example of what you were just talking about. Andy Ngo? How do you say that?
I think it's Ngo, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Why would you be glad he's safe when you have repeatedly called him an existential threat to democracy and that he is like Hitler? Don't you want someone like that to be killed?
Yeah, and a bunch of other people have said the same thing.
Yeah.
But then all that shows is politicians are hypocrites, and we already knew that.
Yeah. A lot of the posts that I'm seeing. Okay, so this one's from Donald Trump Jr. Again, folks, shots fired at Trump Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida. An AK-47 was discovered in the bushes per local law enforcement. This is everything that we've covered already, but if you guys are just joining, the Trump campaign has released a statement confirming former President Trump is safe. A suspect has reportedly been apprehended. I cannot speak tonight. President Trump is safe following gunshots in his vicinity. Still can't talk. Vivek
You need
says
more
grateful
caffeine.
that President Trump. Yeah, I've already had too much today, so I can't have any more. We'll continue to cover this as any sort of new information comes in. I don't anticipate getting too much new information tonight, Sunday night. We'll likely learn more things over the next few days. But let's get to a couple super chats. This one from James Rivera says, Taylor Swift fan slid. Though them women on pumpkin spice lattes is dangerous, y'all. Kanye was right. Not really actually sure what this means. James Rivera, I think I'm friends with him on Facebook. I don't know what this means.
I don't either. I was looking at some articles earlier today about Taylor Swift's endorsement of Vice President Harris, and I don't really know anything about Taylor Swift other than she's a pop singer. But the stories I saw suggested that there's been some polling that her endorsement may actually be harming Vice President Harris's campaign, because like 8% said it was more likely to make them vote for Vice President Harris, but like 20% said it was less likely to make them vote. And most people said it wouldn't make a difference either way, but more people were saying it would make them less likely to vote for her than said it would make them more likely to vote for her.
Wow.
But that's all I know about Taylor Swift in this issue, and pretty much all I know about Taylor Swift to begin with.
Fair enough. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Caleb Jackson says, I think the shooter's motive. This is the guy actually that sent me and informed me that this even happened. He said, I think the shooter's motive was in part fame given the GoPro, similar to mass shooters who see themselves as martyrs. Sick way to gain infamy.
Yeah, and that brings up another point that I've made in other contexts, which is usually if someone is mad enough to want to kill an American president, they want people to know about it. They like when John Wilkes Booth shot President Lincoln, he jumps on the stage from, the balcony at Ford's Theater. He actually, severely injures his leg doing that. But the first thing he does is turn to the audience and yell, Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. So he was publicly taking credit for what he'd just done. And other presidential assassins have done the same thing. So it's not surprising to me that this guy would want to GoPro his assassination. If he had been able to pull it off, then he would have live video of the president being killed on camera, and he would have been proud of that and distributed it. The interesting exception to this rule is Lee Harvey Oswald, because when they brought Lee Harvey Oswald into custody at the Dallas police station, Oswald said, I haven't killed anybody. I'm just a patsy, which is very interesting if he really were the shooter, because why isn't he mad about Kennedy? Why isn't he telling people from the housetops, I did it. I've ended that horrible threat to our country and world. The fact that Lee Harvey Oswald denied responsibility is at least some evidence that he was telling the truth, that he was just a patsy.
Let's go back to this whole topic of something that we've been wanting to talk about for a while, which is, does this provide some evidence to think that God is involved here? And I think actually, this may shock you, but I think it actually does, because, and this is not something that I'm like happy to admit, because it just, I don't want to be like associated with conspiracy theorists, and I don't think this is necessarily conspiracy theory.
But let me comment for just a second on that. Conspiracy theory is being used these days as an insult term, but I don't think that it should be, because there are conspiracies in the world. In fact, we have laws against conspiracies because they exist. In law, a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more people to commit an action that is illegal. And those really exist. We've discovered multiple conspiracies. The mafia is a conspiracy. The 9/11 terrorists were conspiracies. Iran-Contra involved a conspiracy. there are conspiracies all the stinking time. And so we shouldn't just dismiss something as that would involve a conspiracy. What we need to do is look at the situation and say, do we have evidence of a conspiracy in this case?
Right. Right. Yeah. I guess, I'll leave that aside. I won't even touch the topic of conspiracies.
I was saying that for the audience's benefit, not.
Yeah. I guess I'll just share my thoughts. Okay. I'll just share what I actually think. So what I actually think is that the hypothesis that God intervened to save Trump, I think that these two events taken together supports that hypothesis. And I'm not saying that it supports it to a great degree or anything, but I do think just from like a logical, philosophical perspective, these two events, again, when taken together, because they're both just very unlikely, under the hypothesis that God wants to like protect Trump and live, and perhaps even wants to see him become president again, suppose that's our hypothesis, then these events are not too unexpected. They're not too surprising. Like this is the kind of thing we would kind of expect to see. So like if God is actively trying to protect Trump and save him from would-be assassins, these assassination attempts being thwarted, that seems like to be very consistent with that hypothesis. But then if God is not involved and there is no divine being who is trying to protect Trump, what sort of data or evidence would we expect in that case? And I don't think that we would necessarily expect to see what we do see in these two cases. Again, when taken together, like if it was just once, if there was an assassination attempt, just the other one, like just the one with the bullet barely missing the ear, that one still I think has a really good chance of like, there could be something going on here. Sorry, I need to take a drink of water.
No problem.
But then when we've got this, where it does seem fairly unlikely that they would happen to walk up on this guy just right before something bad was about to happen, especially given the fact that they had less personnel out there on the golf course, because again they've got rational reasons like why they do that, because he is a former president and whatnot. But I think that adds to the point that like there's a greater chance of something bad happening. Just like, if nature was to take its course, there's a greater chance of something bad happening because they got less people on the golf course. And so I think all of that, when you take it together, the previous assassination attempt failing, this one failing, the hypothesis that God is trying to protect Trump, that actually does get a sort of boost in probability. It does count as evidence. I mean, you like it or not, that does get a boost. And one thing, though, to keep in mind is that you might just think that hypothesis is just too improbable in its own right. Like it's not even a hypothesis taking seriously. And so even if there is some evidence for it, we shouldn't really take it seriously. Here's an example of something that's similar, that people might also feel like this. Okay, so I'll just say it. So you guys are probably familiar with like the alien hypothesis that aliens exist. We've actually talked about that on this channel. So we've got actually a lot of evidence that there is alien activity on the planet. But what you might think is that, well, actually the existence of aliens is so unlikely by itself that even if you've got some little piece of evidence here, another piece of evidence here, it's not going to give you like what you need to actually
you're going Bayesian on us.
I'm trying to, but I'm trying not to use that language.
Yeah.
But yeah, you might think, well, okay, even if we've got a little bit of evidence in this case provides a little bit more evidence. Okay, it doesn't matter, because the hypothesis that you're looking at, that aliens exist, is just too unlikely. Like it's so unlikely that even if you've got a little bit of evidence for it, it doesn't matter. And so that's what someone might say in the case of Trump. It's like, well, you haven't proven that God actually is intervening in this case, because God would never, why would God want to intervene to save Trump? Like even if God exists, why is he trying to save Trump? Especially when you take into consideration that in the first example of the assassination attempt, someone in the audience died. There was someone who lost their life there, and Trump was saved. But why would God want to do that? Why would God save Trump, but then not save this other person in the audience who seemed like a pretty stand-up guy. And so, yeah, I think that's, I guess to kind of summarize my thoughts on this, I didn't expect to get so animated with this, but to summarize my thoughts, I think it does provide some evidence, but then the question is it going to give you enough evidence to actually conclude that God is really at work here? And I think that is debatable. I think what's not debatable is that it is actually some evidence for that hypothesis.
I think we're broadly in agreement. I mean, you've essentially fleshed out something that I was noting earlier, that both of these incidents have aspects to them that are improbable or seem improbable, at least based on what we know. And we know very little about the current one. I mean, they could have had him surrounded by 40 agents marching down the golf course, in which case maybe it's not so improbable that one of them spotted this, right. Especially if they see the backpacks hanging there and then notice the rifle between them. The two backpacks could call more attention to the rifle than if it was just the barrel of the rifle sticking through the fence. But I agree. If our hypothesis is God, and people can propose any hypothesis they want. They could propose God is protecting Trump. They could propose God as a hypothesis. They could propose God doesn't care about Trump. They could propose the reverse, that God is sending assassins to try to kill Trump. But whatever hypothesis you propose, if you propose God is protecting Trump, then both of these incidents, the fact they didn't work and they do include aspects that seem less probable or unlikely, that I would classify them as evidence that favors that hypothesis. The question would then be, to use a term from statistics, what's the prior probability that the hypothesis that God is protecting Trump is true? And I think people are going to have very different assessments on that. Someone who's coming from someone who's coming from a position like Brandon, I forget his last name, the guy who claimed to predict
Brandon
the first
Biggs.
assassination. Yeah, Brandon Biggs.
By the way, I did look up his channel to see if he'd talked about this one. Nothing. At least, I mean, from what I was able to scan, I didn't see anything.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I don't think he's a genuine prophet or a genuine precognitive. So I'm not surprised he would miss this. But someone coming from his perspective who is very sold on the idea that God is heavily involved in current world affairs and Trump is a major player in current world affairs and he's on the side of right, from Brandon Biggs's point of view, all of that would lead him to have a higher prior probability or higher confidence that God is protecting Trump before these two events happen. And then he would see the two events as strengthening them. But I can see other people taking other perspectives. One of the arguments I saw people use against Brandon Biggs's prediction, where he thought Trump had some kind of ear injury as a result of an assassination bullet, which turned out to be true. Other people said, look, the people, Trump's opponents, have been calling him Hitler, literally Hitler, for years, and it's not surprising if he's doing well in the polls that people would start taking pot shots at him, and so that would tend to decrease in their view, the prior probability that God has taken a special interest in protecting President Trump. And then if you really want to, cross-vet this possibility, you could say, well, maybe God hates Trump. He's on the side of wrong, and God is sending assassins to try to do him in before the election. But unfortunately, because of human weakness, the assassinations have failed thus far. So I think that people from different perspectives, and that last one's a devil's advocate idea, but it's again possible. In terms of the logical space involved, one could propose that hypothesis. I think people from different perspectives are going to have very different estimates of how likely of the hypothesis proposed is that God is protecting Trump. But if that's the hypothesis, I would agree these do count as evidence in favor of it. I just don't think they would be decisive. Also, speaking as an apologist, I guess I'd mention two things. One is I never endorse candidates or parties. I have my own political views, but I never do that because if I did, I would lose half the people I'm trying to serve apologetically because they'd say, "Oh, you're an advocate of candidate X. I'm not going to listen to you anymore." Or "You're an advocate of party Y. I'm not going to listen to you anymore." So I'm very hesitant to, come across as partisan, and saying God is protecting President Trump to me would come across as partisan because it would imply God endorses President Trump, and who is going to disagree with God? So
Just
I
come
would
out and
have
say it. You're voting for Kamala. We all know it.
I can neither confirm nor deny, no matter what name you put in that slot. I'm giving the Glomar response.
Okay, real quick. Are you gonna vote?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
Okay. You're just not revealing who it is, but you are going to vote. See, that's
Yep.
my thing is I don't even know if I should there's a serious debate in political philosophy of whether or not your vote is even worth anything because you're one person and your one vote is not really going to actually do anything. Practically speaking, if no one voted, obviously that would be an issue.
Mhm.
But if one person, if you individually does not vote and everyone else votes, then this you're still in the situation of okay, does it even do anything? I mean, that's not the reason why I'm considering not voting, but
to me, the fact that individual votes tend to have such a de minimis impact on a political race.
I love that word, de minimis.
Yeah, is an argument that voting is not obligatory for individuals, but that's a separate question. Then, do you plan to vote? Because in order to do good, you need as de minimis as an individual vote's effect is, you need enough of them to get to a good outcome. And
so voting, in your view, would be supererogatory.
I would say it's at least consistent with good citizenship and a moral and just and good thing to do. I just wouldn't say it's an obligatory thing to do.
Yeah. For those of you that have never heard that word, I was trying to one up you. Okay.
Oh,
for those of you that have never, supererogatory.
Supererogatory. Yeah. More than what is required.
Yeah. I was trying to, for those of you that have never heard that term, it's a fancy philosophical term. It just means, you kind of go above and beyond what's required of you.
Yeah. The other thing is I'm just hesitant. There are a lot of people who try to apply when we read the Bible, and like the historical books of the Old Testament, it's really clear how the biblical authors are interpreting the events of their time in terms of divine involvement. So,
man, I was going to make the same point. I know exactly where you're going, but continue.
Yeah. So it's very common for ancient Hebrews in the Bible to interpret the events of their own day in terms of God did this and God wanted this and God did not want that and so forth. And a lot of people today tend to do the same thing. I refer to that as theologizing current events. But one of the things that Christian history has shown is that it's very difficult to accurately theologize events. Now, in the case of the Bible, we could say, well, they're special for a couple of reasons. One is they're God's chosen people in a special way, and so God might take a special interest in them. Also, they have the advantage of being divinely inspired in their interpretation of the events of their day. We don't have those same advantages today. And so I think it is risky to try to look at events, whether they are national events or just the events of your own personal life, and say, oh, God did this because he wanted this in my life or in our nation's life, or God did that because he wanted that or didn't want that in my life or my nation's life. I think that I can't rule out that style of reasoning, but I think if you're going to engage in it, you need to be very tentative with it. And a lot of people I see are being much more non-tentative much more confident about applying that style of reasoning than I think is justifiable.
Yeah, I was gonna say like this type of miracle is a very public miracle, almost like it's almost unprecedented. So like the miracles that we hear about in the scriptures are put on blast, and those are made public because they're written down in these inspired books, and that's how we know about them today. These documents have survived this long time, and then they've been propagated, and they're in the hands of billions of people literally across the globe. And so that's how we know about the miracles that happened in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But nowadays, like if a miracle like this were to happen on the news, it'd be a pretty big deal. And so the question would be, kind of going along with what you're saying here, is that like, what would God's reasons be for wanting to make such a public like stamp of approval on Trump in this case? Like, yeah, he needs to be in office, and there's got to be some reason that God would have for his ultimate plan for humanity. Like this would have to play into that. There'd got to be some reason. And so the question would be for people that think that this is a very good hypothesis, at least with something that we should consider. Is God actually coming in and protecting Trump? And like, you've got to have at least something worked out. Like get some sort of reason in your head as to why God would be inclined to do such a thing in the case of Trump. And I think that's something that probably people haven't worked out yet. They're just like, oh yeah, Trump is great. Yeah, God would definitely want to. But no, it's got to be way more. It's got to tie in with God's ultimate plan for humanity.
Yeah. To give an example of an event where I'd be more open to a theological interpretation, I'd cite the Battle of Lepanto in the 1500s, where Muslim forces were on the verge of conquering Europe, and they were defeated at the naval battle of Lepanto. And, you had Christians praying, and you had the Pope praying and everything, and the Muslim forces were defeated. And it's like, okay, that would have been a major event in Christian civilization if it had gone the other way. And so I would be more inclined to say that, not saying I would be convinced, but I would be much more inclined to say, okay, we can detect the hand of God working in a special event in this way through. And by the way, I might ought to mention the class of miracle we're talking about, because these miracles, whether it's Trump surviving these assassination attempts or the Battle of Lepanto, they weren't physical miracles where God, like broke the quote unquote broke the laws of nature or deviated from the laws of nature. They were situations where a lot of coincidences happened that enabled a favorable outcome, and you could thus classify them as a moral miracle rather than a physical miracle. It's not like God rained fire from the sky on the Muslims at the Battle of Lepanto, or God rained fire on the two physical fire on the two gunmen in these situations. They did get bullet fire, but it's not like fire fell from the heavens on them. That would be a physical miracle. It didn't happen in these cases. So this is more of a moral miracle. Well, in the case of the Battle of Lepanto, it was a civilization changing moment. And so I would be more that would have profoundly impacted Christian civilization. And that was also when Christianity was just beginning to spread to the New World. So what might have happened? The world would look very different if Muslim forces had won the Battle of Lepanto. So I could see a stronger case for saying that God directly intervened there with a moral miracle. When it comes to President Trump, though, even if you're a big fan of President Trump, you think he did great in his first term, you want him to come back and have a second term, he's still only going to have 4 years. And then someone else is going to follow him. And the way American politics works, whoever follows him, maybe his vice president would get another 4, maybe 8 years. But the way American politics works with our first past the post system is the two political parties are set up in such a way that they are going to alternate. And if we're going to be alternating between Trump-esque policies and radically non-Trump policies, then the benefits of that 4 years that he could get are going to be limited. It's not going to be a civilization turning moment the way the Battle of Lepanto was. And so I would see less of a reason for God to intervene in a special way with moral miracles in this case. I'm not ruling them out. I'm just saying demonstrating that that's what's going on seems harder to me, because the stakes of just 4 years of good governance, if that's what you believe he's going to provide, is just not comparable to some more major civilization turning event, unless of course we're on the brink of nuclear war, which could change things.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and so maybe in the future we can look back and be like, okay, yeah, we absolutely needed Trump in that case because he was the only person that could avoid nuclear war or something like that. We don't really know, I guess, at this point. But that I guess the point though that I would want to make is we just got to have something worked out, like have some sort of like hint at a reason that God would have to that would incorporate Trump into his ultimate plan for humanity. And then I would also be concerned about, like, if that was the case, I mean, Trump seems like a fairly arrogant person, right? He seems very confident. He seems, so I would be a little bit like worried that this would just add to that. Like if he were to, I mean, and we kind of see that at least when I was listening to the interview with Elon Musk and Trump, I was kind of getting that, like he was like, yeah, this is really something. Like I was really honored by God choosing to do this, and it just seems
well, politicians wrap themselves in the flag all the time, and if they have the opportunity to wrap themselves in the Christian flag, they can do that too. Just looking at it cynically. Having said that, whether one thing Trump crosses into arrogance is going to be in the eye of the beholder. I would say,
right,
objectively, he has sharp elbows and robust self-confidence. Whether you think that's arrogance or not is, up to you. But I can see how politicians of all stripes lie and exaggerate and play things in their benefit. And so I could see a Trump critic saying, well, of course he's going to wrap himself in the Christian flag and say, God has designated me as the person. He saved me. You need to vote for me. Okay. And, that's an argument people could make. At the same time, other people could say, I don't care if he's got sharp elbows and robust self-confidence and is even arrogant and is wrapping himself in the Christian flag. He was a better president than what Kamala Harris would be, and I'm voting for him anyway because I want the good governance and I don't care about his personality.
Really, I just wanted to quickly reiterate, if you are just joining and you didn't know, there was a second assassination attempt on President Trump's life. This one was thwarted earlier, before there could be any shots fired on President Trump, like in this case that we're just seeing in this video right here. There was a gun found on the scene, and they apparently the Secret Service engaged the would-be shooter before he had time to get any shots off, and then he was actually apprehended. So let me scroll down and show you a picture. This guy's name is Ryan Ruth. He was born in Hawaii. This is his picture. We're going to learn a lot more about him over the next few days, especially since we have him in custody. They're going to learn as much as they can about him, I'm sure, and then release nothing to the public about him. That's exactly what they did in the last. Like, they give us no information, which is just really unfortunate.
Well, in terms of the previous, I mean, they say it's due to their being careful, and they've got internal procedures that require them to take time, and I can credit that up to a point, and I can attribute that to incompetence up to a point. But I think as time passes, it's becoming more and more clear that the Secret Service and the FBI are stonewalling. With regard to that first incident, incidentally, I saw another thing on X where this is from @ElectionWiz, and it says, break-in, Eric Prince, founder of the private security firm Blackwater, there's a name some people may know, calls on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to immediately assume control of the investigation into the second Trump assassination attempt. He adds, quote, the feds have dropped the ball thoroughly on Butler, Pennsylvania. Time for Florida to save the day. And I can imagine a lot of people agreeing with that sentiment that Florida needs to take a more active role because the Secret Service and the FBI have shown themselves not to be forthcoming when an event like this happens. Now, this one I think is a little different for two reasons. One is the local sheriff's department has already been very active in getting information out. And so I would expect that's a positive sign in and of itself. The other thing is that the Secret Service can count this one as a success. Butler was a failure. The gunman started firing. He hit former President Trump. He killed and injured other people. That was a massive failure. So they would naturally want to be less forthcoming about that and exposing their incompetence and possible malice to some degree than they would in this, which they can sell as a win because the gunman did not start firing and nobody was injured. So they can say, yay, we achieved it here, and that would make them more willing to be forthcoming about what happened in this incident.
So I just wanted to pull up this tweet here from Elon Musk. He's asking, why is no one, well, he didn't ask this. He says that no one is even trying to assassinate Biden and Kamala. And this one was a sort of post from why did they want to kill Donald Trump, which is an interesting question. Although we don't know if there were any attempts on Biden or Kamala, we just haven't been made aware of, right? There could have been attempts on both of their lives, and we just aren't aware of them in the way that we are in these cases. Because in the first case with Trump, it was like caught on camera, like there was no escaping it, that we saw it. And in this case, there was just reporting that happened immediately on it. And so that's the reason why we know about these, but there could have been, and I would suspect there probably have been attempts, because stuff like this, there are lots of crazy people in the world. If there are school shootings, there's probably been attempts on presidents that we don't know about.
Oh, yeah. Plots that got caught early enough that they could be covered up. Because one of the things you don't want, it's like, I guess there's a comparison here to how the press does not report suicides. You know, when ordinary people kill themselves, they don't report suicides. Now, if someone jumps off of, the Empire State Building on camera, they can't avoid it. But they tend not to report suicides because they don't want the copycat effect. And the same thing is going to be true of presidential assassinations. If they catch a plot at an early enough stage that they don't need to make it public, then they don't make it public, because you don't want people thinking, oh, there's a whole bunch of people going after the president right now, and none of them has succeeded. Maybe that gives me hope as an assassination to go try myself. And they don't want those attempts, so they don't publicize it if they don't have to. They did have to publicize it in Butler, Pennsylvania, and one can argue they had to publicize it here because there was a witness who got a photograph, and there may have been other people who knew, and they invoked the state's license plate cameras and caught the guy, and that created a big public scene with a bunch of police cars surrounding the guy's vehicle and taking him into custody. And for that matter, given the present state of affairs, Trump may want to let people know about this. So I think this is another one where it would have been much harder for them to keep this one covered up.
Let's get to a couple super chats. This one from Snud G Wick.
Snudgewick. Cool name.
Snudgewick. Jesus is God. God bless you. Jesus is Lord. Sorry. God bless you guys.
Likewise.
God bless
you too.
Well. Exactly. Antonio Yu says, as a Catholic, I will pray for Donald, to our Virgin Maria, to the statues of our saints, to the Pope. You know, everything that makes Christians upset.
Yeah, well, Catholics are Christians. In fact, speaking as a Catholic, we're the OG Christians. But there
using that lingo, I see.
Yeah, there are. I try to be diverse in the different pools of culture I pull on. But there are anti-Catholic Christians, and there are things that do upset them. Fortunately, not all non-Catholics are anti-Catholics. There are a bunch who are friendly, especially these days. Point of fact, we're not killing each other anymore, which is awesome.
Let me just pull in a couple comments from people on the stream, and we'll just get some thoughts here. Did you buy your gold Trump sneakers? I don't know anything
it-
about this. Are there apparently some gold Trump sneakers? Maybe there are. I mean, I can see that being a thing with his NFTs. Have you seen those?
Mm-mm.
His NFTs. I think it's like a digital trading card. You can buy those, and it's like basically these like
Yeah,
different pieces of artwork. Yeah, of
I know
Trump,
it.
like
I'm
all
familiar
buff
with
and
NFT.
stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with NFTs. I just haven't seen Trump NFTs.
Yeah, yeah. Here
For
we go.
people who want to look that
Peacemaker.
up, it stands for non-fungible token.
Peacemaker 315 paying to have comment on screen. LOL. How come? What about us poor people? Jesus said to help out. Yeah, so we're not opposed to putting comments that people haven't paid for, as is exampled by this.
However, to
Being
reference
up on
what Cameron mentioned at the beginning, one of the things about super chats, even though they do involve money, is the system flags them in a special way to help the
Yes.
creators see them. Whereas
Yes.
if you've got a big comment stream, it'll just be blazing by at who knows what speed. It makes it much harder to identify, but the system will flag and grab the super chats, which makes it much easier for the content creator to be able to interact with them.
Exactly. I can't, while I'm talking with Jimmy, while I'm looking at different things, I can't actually watch the chat and just like pick out comments the entire time. That would be impossible, at least for my brain makeup. It would be not very easy.
Especially
Jimmy, why
at
don't
8
we do
o'clock
this?
on Sunday night.
Exactly. This was very unexpected. This is not what I anticipated doing this evening. We actually made some tostadas, which is our new. You know what? Maybe we can talk about this as we close things out. You're I can't tell with your beard that you've lost weight. I keep seeing you give comments. Yeah, you look thinner. You look great. I mean, I've lost about a little over 20 pounds. So
Cool.
And this was independent. Like we didn't do this as like a joint sort of like, hey, let's lose weight together type thing. We just both happen to, I guess, want to get a little bit more serious about our health. And man, I can say that it has been a game changer. Like it's the best decision I've ever made in my life.
And we're both using different systems to lose weight, but it's working for both of us.
Yes. And I will make a video. I'm planning on making a whole bunch of content on like just not a whole bunch of content, but I am going to explain like what I did and how I lost weight and stuff, and then the impact that it's had on my life. That is all still in the works. And so, just stay tuned. If you're interested in what I did in particular, then I will just post about it, because I think it actually could help a lot of people. So,
and
we
I'm
did
happy
actually
to
receive another super chat, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what I've been doing is a combination of low carb, low calorie, and intermittent fasting. I basically eat twice a day. In the morning, I'll have like 200 calories or so while I take nutritional supplements, because it makes it settles your stomach and stuff. And then I have my main meal at night before bed. So I only eat twice a day. The first one is only like a couple hundred calories, and it's all low carb and low calorie. One of the things I've been using a lot lately is konjac noodles, because they're like spaghetti. Only an entire bag of konjac is like 9 calories. So it's almost entirely fiber. And so I'm using a lot of fiber to fill my stomach, and it's been working. After I moved back to my hometown here of Fayetteville, Arkansas, I was setting up my household after a cross-country move, and so I didn't really have time to cook, and I was eating I'd order in from a lot of restaurants, and I was also learning what are the local restaurants like. And so I had gotten up to around 210 pounds. And then after I got settled in, I started doing this, and I'm now down to 183, which is just 2 pounds above my pre-COVID low, which was 181. And so that's my immediate goal, is lose another 2 pounds, get back down to 181. I'm 6 foot tall, by the way, for people who wonder. And then I plan to keep losing. So my first goal is 181. Then I plan to keep losing. I would like to get down at least briefly to 159, because at 159, which is not a historically unreasonable weight for a 6 foot guy. It's thin, but it's not unreasonable. I also plan to determine my final weight that I want to get to by historical standards, not contemporary ones. What was healthy in the 1950s, let's say, not the 2020s, for a given height. But I want to get down to 159 because I used to be vastly heavier than I am now. The highest weight that I ever remember seeing on a scale was 318 pounds. And so that's my peak weight. It may have been higher than that, but that's the highest one I ever remember seeing was 318 pounds.
Now I remember.
So at 159, I will be able to literally say that I am half the man I used to be.
Yeah. Yep. I remember.
And then
that.
I may settle out somewhere in the 160s or 170s, but that's to be determined.
Yeah. Well, let me read this super chat here. So Rebecca Lynn says, my family came over from Italy, same for me, in 1900 because life became so hard. What country would people move to today? I feel like America is on its way down. I hear Putin is offering citizenship. Not that I'd want to live there.
Well, I guess it's going to depend on the person in question. Speaking for myself, I'm very happy to be back in Arkansas. And if Arkansas were its own country, I would move to that one.
Yeah. I'd wonder, America is on its way down. I wonder what I wonder what Rebecca means by that. In what sense is America on its way down? I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying in what sense does she mean? And then how seriously should we consider that? Because I mean, I'll just say this really quickly. Another thing to consider is that as Christians, we've got a sort of mission field no matter where we are, in the world. So if we were to be a sort of quote unquote missionary, we would be in some other country where the living state, it wouldn't be as nice as America, say if you're living in Uganda, okay, depending on, I guess, where you are in Uganda. But the point is that no matter where you are, the standard of living is going to be, I guess, whatever it is, but you've nevertheless got a mission that you've got to fulfill in that area. So where you live as a Christian, I guess the point is, does it necessarily matter? Because we've still got the Great Commission, what we've sort of been called to do, and so that's ultimately what people should be concerned with, maybe in terms of where they live. But
I would say something else that Rebecca Lynn might want to consider doing. One of the people that I follow, and I don't think he's always correct, but one of the people that I follow is a global strategist named Peter Zeihan, Zeihan. And he offers what I consider not infallible, but astute analyses of trajectories of different parts of the world and different countries in the world. And his assessment, which I think is broadly accurate, is even though there are going to be bumps in the road and we're going to be going through some dicey waters in the next few decades, America is, broadly speaking, positioned to remain the world's sole hyperpower, that we don't have any credible competition in that front. And broadly speaking, our demographic and technological trends are positive compared to other places. There are going to be challenges that we face, and America does have flaws, but broadly speaking, his diagnosis for America is optimistic. Our major rivals like Russia and China are both in advanced stages of demographic collapse and are not going to be significant players on the world stage the way they are now. They are not going to overtake us. They are going to fall further and further behind as their demographic winters worsen. The challenge, or one of the major challenges we're going to have, is a Thucydides trap. I haven't seen him use that term, but basically the Thucydides trap is a proposed mechanism whereby if you're an underdog in a fight and you foresee you're going to be more of an underdog in the future, the temptation is to attack now before you lose the advantages that you would have that you currently have. And so so it could be, it's not that they're going to overtake us. What the worst case scenario would be, we get in a nuclear war, a big one, and that knocks us down. But it's not going to be better for them. The only question is, America could lose its place, but as long as we avoid a major nuclear war, we're not scheduled to do so. We're scheduled for the next century to continue to be the world's most prosperous economy with, good living standards and stuff like that. There may be island paradises somewhere that have better living standards, but we're going to remain the world's hyperpower for now, unless we get into a nuclear war.
So let's get back to the topic for today. As we sort of wrap things up, I'll just ask you this last question, then we'll close out the stream. Do you think that this is the last assassination attempt we're going to see on Trump, or at least that we're going to be made aware of?
Well, I hope so, but I don't at all know that that's going to be the case, because we've seen it twice already. And I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons they don't tend to report these things, if they can avoid it, is because of a copycat effect. And Trump's opponents are using such inflamed rhetoric and have not backed off using that rhetoric, even after the first assassination attempt, that it could inspire more copycats. So I don't know that there will be any more. I hope not. I pray not. For people on either side of the political spectrum, I don't want them going after Harris either. But there has been a lot of really inflamed rhetoric, and we've already got 2 attempts, and that could inspire further copycats.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So I would say the Secret Service better ratchet up whatever level of security he's got pronto.
Yes, I agree. I agree with everything. Nothing else to add. Jimmy, it's been great to chat with you, although it's been, really unfortunate topic to discuss. It's been
got into some interesting waters, though.
Yeah, we did. We did, for sure. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you in the next video very soon. We've got a huge debate coming up this week on Islam, so go check that out if you're interested. See you. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?